Good afternoon and welcome to the GHS Countdown. Are you prepared for the June 2015 deadline webinar? So taking you through our webinar today will be myself, Penny Rollinson. So a little bit about me first of all. I joined PRISYM ID over 2 years ago now as UK Consumables Sales Manager. I oversee a very busy sales department offering labelling solutions such as hardware, software, labels and printer ribbons. My background has always been print. I love the diversity of the print, the different types of labels, matching the right labels to the ribbon and customers' requirements. And I have a very good in-depth knowledge of chemical labelling, especially BS 5609. I'm very passionate about labels, hence why I've decided to do this webinar today. Please note that the telephone lines will be muted, so if you do have any questions, please submit them using the question tool on screen. So, from today's webinar, we hope that you'll be able to gain an understanding of the GHS in practical terms, understand the deadlines, transitional periods, and what organisations in the supply chain and products they apply to. Learn the required GHS classification label elements. Explore the common challenges your organisation may encounter. And discover the best practice steps to follow to ensure a painless transition to the classification system. And then I shall answer any questions that you may have. So let me start by taking you through the CLP regulation and the GHS model in practical terms. As many of you will be aware, GHS stands for Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labelling Chemicals. GHS, or Globally Harmonized System, is a UN model for classification, labelling, packaging and safety data sheets of chemicals, SDSs. It is important to remember that it is not a regulation, so countries are not obliged to bring it into force. Each country can implement their own regulations, and even if they use GHS as a basis for the regulations, countries are not obliged to cover all elements from GHS. So, let's have a look at the regulatory framework. So the current regulations are the Dangerous Substances Directive and the Dangerous Preparations Directive, which many of you will know as CHIP. And the new regulations, which is our focus for today's presentation, CLP, which is the EU and EEA implementation of GHS. So what's happening in the regulatory framework? CHIP, which is Chemical Hazard Information and Packaging for Supply law, set by the Dangerous Substances Directive, DSD, and the Dangerous Preparations Directive, DPD, is being replaced by GHS, Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labelling Chemicals, set by the CLP regulation. Chemicals are divided into substances, which is a chemical element or one of its compounds. Includes substances with stabilizers and impurities which cannot be separated out, and mixtures, also known as preparations, which are mixtures or solutions composed of two or more substances. So why do we need the GHS? There is inconsistent protection for those potentially exposed to the chemicals. Currently, there are multiple classifications, labels and safety data sheets, SDS, for the same product, different systems can exist in different regions. It's also expensive for governments to regulate and enforce, and it's costly for companies to comply with different systems. So the introduction of the GHS within chemical labelling eradicates these problems. The benefits of the GHS will be felt throughout the world. It enhances the protection of human health and the environment for providing an internationally understood system. It also provides a recognised framework to develop regulations for those countries without existing systems. The international trade of chemicals is easier, as chemicals will be able to be identified on an international basis. And lastly, the GHS reduces the need for testing and evaluation against multiple classification systems. In addition to having global benefits, GHS will also help individual companies throughout the world. The positive impacts to companies include an increase in efficiency and reduced costs from compliance with hazard communication regulations, a safer work environment and improved relations with employees, application of expert systems resulting in maximising expert resources and minimising labour and costs, expanded use of training programmes on health and safety, and the facilitation of electronic transmission systems with international scope. Now let's take a look at the required label elements. GHS label require the following to remain visible at all times. A product identifier, which is a name or number used for a hazardous product on a label or in the SDS. GHS pictograms, which are the diamond-shaped symbols you can see on the screen. And signal words, using a maximum of one signal word only to indicate the relative hazard. So it will alert the reader to potential hazards posed by the chemical product. For example, warning or danger, or it could be nothing at all. Hazard statements, describing the nature and degree of the hazard posed by the chemical. Precautionary statements, which supplement the hazard information by briefly providing measures to be taken to minimise or prevent adverse effects, as well as supply information to include the name, address and telephone number of the manufacturer or supplier of the product. And supplementary information, which is a non-harmonised information on the container of a hazardous product that is not required or specified under the GHS, such as repeated exposure may cause dryness or cracking. Now, in terms of the label sizes, this table summarises the do's and don'ts regarding requirements. If you are in doubt, please speak to myself or a member of the team. There is no specified label layout in the GHS other than elements must be located together. Hazard and precautionary statements must be grouped by language, i.e. all the English statements together, all the French statements together, etc. And supplemental information must be placed on a separate section of the label. Here is a typical example of a chemical substance label. And here is a typical example of a chemical mixtures label. Now, it is important to remember that using the correct label materials is a vital component in meeting the compliance. When exporting hazardous chemical goods from the UK using overseas transport, they must be marked with labels designed for long-term durability and performance in harsh environments. To ensure labels meet the requirements, they are tested against British Standard Regulations BS 5609. Now, BS 5609 is used for the exporting of hazardous chemicals. In the event that the transport carrying the chemical drums should have an accident and the drums fall into the sea, the labels must remain on the drums and the information legible. Now, there are various materials that have been tested and approved of British Standard 5609. It must be a synthetic material and can be any of the following. The printer, the ribbon and the ink also needs to be approved. Again, if you'd like an extensive list of approved materials, printers, ribbons and inks, please speak to myself or the team after the webinar. Now, during the transition, your company may experience some common challenges. Now, these could be keeping up to date with the changes, redesigning your labels, or re-educating your workforce, clients and suppliers. They may all prove difficult. There are several steps we'd recommend you to follow to ensure you are prepared in plenty of time before the June 2015 to transition date. Firstly, familiarise yourself with what's required from your organisation for the June 2015 transition date. Hopefully these slides today have helped build a clearer picture. However, myself and team are always on hand to discuss with you in more detail. Perform a chemical inventory to assess the changes you'll need to make and create a transition plan for your company. Form a plan to acquire, update and manage incoming SDS documents. Update workplace labels according to new regulations. And schedule employee, client and supplier training to get them accustomed to the changes. It may all seem daunting, but don't panic. As I mentioned earlier, should you be unsure of how best to go about implementing any of these steps advised or need further clarification on the CLP regulation requirements, please contact us or your specialist labelling supplier who will be able to help you. We have successfully walked many of our customers through the earlier substances transition period from 2010. So I've now come to the end of the presentation and shall spend the remaining time answering the questions that have been sent in so far, hopefully. If you have any additional questions that you'd like to ask, please send them in now using the question tool on screen and I'll try to answer as many as I can. So if you could bear with me for a few minutes while I collate a few, thank you. Okay, thanks everyone. We've had quite a few questions in, so now I'll be answering some of your questions. Thanks for sending them. Now the first one I have that's come in, it says, why now? Which is a really, really good question. As I know that some of you may say 2015 is quite a way off, but realistically there's so many processes for chemical companies to reclassify for the transition date of June 2015, I feel it's always better to be safe than sorry. So getting prepared ahead of the deadline is the best course of action you and your company could take. This way, you allow yourself and your staff the time to become more accustomed to the global harmonised system without having a manic and stressful impact on everyone at the time of the final compliance, which is 2017. So thanks for sending that question in. So that's a very good question. Let's have a look at another question that we've got. So this is, during the transitional period, do labels have to show CLP and DSD, DPD classifications? Again, that's another good question, so thanks. Actually, I would answer that as no, as once the classification has been updated to CLP, the label then must be in accordance with CLP. There would be different provisions in place really for the safety data sheets, but no is the answer to that. Let's have a look, see if we've got any other further questions. Here's one. Does the 2-year extension to the reclassification mean that I can continue to label our current products as per CHIP, DSD, DPD for that entire 2-year period? Okay, so the answer to that would be no, as it only applies to batches, not actual product lines that have already been shipped or transported from your premises and therefore physically in the supply chain and then no longer in your control. So long and short is anything still on your premises after the 1st of June 2015 must leave your premises correctly relabeled in accordance with the GHS system. I strongly advise you not to take any risks, as doing so could result in problems further down the supply chain. It could lead ultimately to you damaging your own organisation's reputation or putting others at risk. And at the end of the day, your customers will expect to be receiving products that are in compliance. So again, thanks for that question. It's a very good one. Let's have a look. There is another one. Can the red diamonds be pre-printed on the label to allow us to print the pictograms in black? And where can I find the most up-to-date pictogram symbols? Well, we'd approach this really. There's a couple of correct answers to this question. So we'd approach this really by supplying the pre-printed labels with the red diamonds already on them, and then the customer would put the relevant black pictogram inside the diamond with the required signal words and any other print they wish to add, such as barcodes or anything they need to put on. But then we do have some clients who prefer us to print the complete pictogram with the red diamonds. They then just add any additional information. Here at PRISYM ID, we also provide labelling software, and one of the labelling software types we provide is PRISYM Chemica, and it's manufactured by our specialist developers to provide you with the most up-to-date symbols for the correct use in chemical labelling. As all updates are enforced by the regulators, our pictogram software database will automatically update, so you know that your company remains compliant at all times by using this software. So it is really good, and I do recommend that. So we have another question, which is, where can I find help with a transition? So help is available in quite a few forms really, and I do recommend that it's worth visiting the European Chemicals Agency, which is the ECHA website, which is www.echa.europa.eu. I'll say that again in case any of you want to write it down. It's www.echa.europa.eu. Alternatively, a member of our team would be more than happy to come and visit you on site to help you through the transition. Collectively, we have many years' experience working in the chemical industry, supplying customers compliant labels fit for purpose, guiding them through the latest updates, finding solutions, technical information of new products, new printers that are coming out. So we do work closely with our clients in making sure they have everything at their fingertips. So that's great. Thank you for those questions. Unfortunately, some have not been able to answer. But as I mentioned earlier, I will be sending you a copy of all the questions and answers along with a recording of this webinar afterwards. I really do hope you've enjoyed the presentation and found it informative, and I do appreciate your time and attention. If you do have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact me by either mail or phone as displayed on the slide. And thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy fireworks night. Thank you.